everyone. This is Stephanie, the founder of Host Agency Reviews, and you are tuning in for the Friday 15, which means it's Friday, it's 12 p.m. Central Time, and we have some questions that all of you have submitted that we are going to answer. And if you are wondering how can you submit questions, you can do it really easily. You're just going to go to hostagencyreviews.com/Friday15 and then click on the submit a question button. Abby, who's in the comments, will also link to that for you. So let's see. Today we have on a co-host. We have on Stephanie Gagnon with Just Perfect Travel out of Arizona. Hello, Stephanie.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me on today. I'm so excited to answer these questions.
Of course, we are so excited to have another Stephanie on. Now, for those of you that don't know, I snowboarded in Tucson this last winter. We're back in Minnesota now, but Stephanie and I met up for dinner and it was super, super fun. So when we had an opening on the Friday 15, I was like, I want to invite Stephanie because one, she's super fun and knowledgeable. And two, her name is Stephanie. So very exciting to have you on. um, Let's see a few things, housekeeping kind of, before we get into our questions for today. So, one is our survey is going to be coming up in the next week or two. We're just beta testing it now. So, if you haven't taken our survey before, it'll probably take you anywhere between like 5 and 10 minutes, depending on the structure of your agency. But the nice thing is, everyone that takes the survey, and last year there was over 2,000 advisors that took it. Everybody that takes this survey gets a free research report from it. So these are 70 to 80 pages of amazing information to help you benchmark where you are at your agency, can help you see some of the bigger trends that are happening. So if you would like to sign up for reminders, if you've never taken it before, we're going to link to our newsletter and you can sign up for that. And then in the newsletter, we will send out reminders when the survey comes out and it's time to take it. So, Stephanie, have you taken our survey ever?
I have. Yep, I take it every time. And I just
Yay!
think it's such a valuable tool for advisors because there's so much information that's in there.
It's crazy how much information is in there. People think I have the whole thing memorized, and we actually do 3 reports, one for hosted advisors, one for independent contract or like independently accredited, and one for employees. And so people will be like, what percentage of this is this, Steph? And I'm like, I don't know. They're like 80 pages each. I can't remember it all. So lots of good stuff. We hope you sign up because they are really fun to read when they come out. Well, let's see. So, our first question today is from Madi D, and this is a really good one, very timely. Maddie says, I'm thinking about trying to become a new travel advisor as a side hustle, potential career change. But with the way the world is right now, with travel bans, tariffs, impending US recession, I'm wondering what the outlook actually is for someone trying to start a new career in this field. What are real travel agents preparing for? And is it a good idea to get into this business while all of this political stuff is happening? So let's start. Maybe let's start with you, Stephanie, and you can chat with us as an advisor. You've had your agency for 14 years.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
just a little less than 14 years now.
Okay. So as someone that's been in it for 14 years, so you saw did you see the recession then? Oh no, you didn't see the 2008.
No, it was just after, but I definitely have a lot of colleagues in the industry that had gone through that.
Yeah. So, how are you kind of preparing for things? Because there is a lot of uncertainty on what's coming down the pipeline. And you see the headlines about especially with the inbound traffic to the US dropping. So, what are you doing to prepare?
Yeah. So, okay. So this question, I really liked this question because there's a lot of different perspectives, and everybody has a little bit different perspective on this. But one of the questions that she asked was, is this a good time to really start a travel agency or to start to get into the travel industry?
Yep.
And I do think it's a perfect time to become a travel advisor, especially if you have the opportunity to do it as a side hustle, which I think she mentioned that she might be able to do, where you can kind of still rely on another job for right now while you start to grow your business. But there's an old saying when it comes to investing that I love. And so they say that the absolute best day to start investing was yesterday. So the second best day to start investing is today. And starting a business or starting a travel agency is an investment in yourself and your own growth just overall in life. So now with the travel industry, of course, it is a little bit different than other types of jobs, but and it definitely has had its fair share of like interruptions over the year. Like
Yeah.
Stephanie, you had just mentioned, even the recession or the last big recession that we all know of, back in 2007, for a few years hitting that, and of course COVID and things like that. And even if you go way back when, there was even 9/11 when that happened, that really greatly impacted the travel industry. And there's been a lot of other kind of interruptions in the travel industry specifically over the years that do impact travel agencies and their businesses. And so, like some of those other smaller interruptions that we've had are kind of like when we had Zika, the Zika
Oh,
virus a
yep.
few years ago, that was hitting a lot of the Caribbean islands, and then even smaller things like the wildfires in Maui a couple years ago, that definitely changed things. And then there's been volcanoes in Iceland that have, really caused a lot of travel interruptions for travelers in general. And what I've learned over the years is that these travel interruptions, for the most part, travelers, they kind of pivot and they adjust. So, like for example, when Zika happened in the Caribbean, we saw a lot of travelers that were like switching to other destinations, maybe like Hawaii, where Zika wasn't as prevalent there. And then, like when the wildfires hit Maui, and we had a lot of travelers that were booked for Maui, we pivoted and we kind of switched them over to other islands or booked vacations for other Hawaiian islands instead. And then, of course, even when COVID hit and kind of shut down the world, a lot of travelers, when things did start to open back up a little bit, a lot of travelers focused on, traveling within the US.
Yep.
So I do see that travelers pivot a lot. But another thing, especially in regards to like the economy, and there's so many speculations on if we're going to be seeing another recession coming in, or these travel bans or tariffs or anything that's happening. One other big thing that I've learned over the years is to not sell with my own wallet. So if I'm not feeling like, oh, I don't know if, like, with everything happening right now, I'm not sure if I really want to spend my money on a vacation right now because I don't know what's going to happen. There's so many other travelers where they might not be affected by that. So, it's really important to kind of keep that in mind, that
Mm.
there's a lot of other travelers that, they have a I guess a better risk factor, and they'll still probably be traveling, or maybe they might not be taking these big trips, but they might still want to travel. And I feel like especially for families, vacations are just so important to them that they usually still will make it happen.
That's a great point, like, not because you usually hear "don't sell your wallet," but it also is "don't sell your risk level."
Your risk level, exactly.
Because if someone's coming to you, and it's not that you shouldn't, make preparations and, like, be thinking smart on how to protect these clients, but it's if they know what's going on in the world and they're still wanting to book trips, then your job is then to make that happen in the safest way possible. So there's like a couple things I think of that advisors can do, um, just because, at the port of entries, there's been some stories in the US about people being turned back, travelers, or um, sometimes being held and then eventually released. And I know that for American travelers, some people are nervous to travel outside the US because they're afraid there might be some reciprocal um, things at the different port of entry. So some things you'll want to check in with your clients about is making sure that their passports are expiring 6 months after they return. So any of those like small things that they should be followed all the time, but especially now you wanna make sure double check with your clients, that they're carrying any proof of return travel so that there isn't any worry or any reason that immigration could hold them back and say, "You might be working here or you might overstay your visa," so making sure that they have the return flight and documentation of that. If you can get visas ahead of time for your clients so they're not having to deal with visas at the port of entry. And then there's two great articles in Travel Weekly that came out kind of addressing this issue. And one of them is about how to protect your clients' payments. Because if we're not in a recession right now, but if we do go into a recession, what happened during COVID was some of the suppliers went out of business because the cash flow for a supplier is a little bit different than it is for other companies. So it's a little bit harder to juggle when there's a recession. So making sure that you're properly vetting those suppliers, keeping in mind, I remember during COVID, I think it was, you would see an article in Travel Weekly saying this company's CEO is saying, no, we're not having any financial problems, which is like a red flag. If they're having to say that, that means there's rumors going around and that advisors in advisors groups, if you're hearing that a supplier isn't paying commissions, I would not be booking them. That's a big red flag. Always have your clients pay with credit card because if for some reason the supplier does go out of business, there may be some recourse with the credit card. Well, they will refund it because of the fact that the supplier went out of business and the client didn't get what they were promised. And then, of course, there's also going to be in your terms and conditions having something in there that says if a supplier goes into default, it is not the fault of the travel advisor. You've tried to vet them the best that you can. And then, Stephanie, with travel insurance, it's always a good idea to push travel insurance, but especially I feel like now talking to clients about travel insurance and travel insurance that covers supplier defaults, or in the case of if you get laid off. I'm not sure. Are there still ones that cover if you get laid off?
There are, yeah, yep, and there are still not a lot, but there are still some travel insurance companies that will still have like a cancel for any reason type of policy too. It might, I know a lot of supplier insurances will offer that, which is great to have, but for your third party, which is a little bit more comprehensive and usually offers more coverage for your travelers, there are still some companies that will do like 50 to 75% of cancel for any reason too. So if it is work related or anything else like that, for a cancellation, they'll still cover that.
Yeah, those are such great ways to try to protect your client the best that you can. And then we'll also link to one, Arnie Wiseman, who's the editor and chief, I think, over at Travel Weekly. I think that's still his title. But he wrote one too. It was kind of interesting reading. So we'll link to it because he talks about an agency in, I think it's in the UK, that specializes in helping clients go to places where it might be more difficult to travel, where it might be unsafe and you wanna make sure that your drivers are vetted and all of these things. And so they had some tips on, how to protect clients, when you're going into a country where you might be nervous about things. And so we'll link to that as well. And then anything else you wanted to add, Stephanie, because I'm with you that it's still a great time. I've said this in prior episodes, but when I was working at a host agency during the recession of 2008, it was actually we were signing on a ton of advisors at that time because so many people were being laid off. They were looking for some other income and to start a new career. And it actually works out well because, and maybe this is your experience, Stephanie, too, but when you start, especially if you're part time, your first like year, there is so much learning. It's not like you're going to be booking every day. You're doing a lot of learning and a lot of setting up the business. And so even if you start during a recession, you're whether or not you start during a recession or not, it's most likely you're not going to have people knocking down your door and like a huge line of people booking. Was that your experience?
Yeah, yep, exactly. That first year, and I talked to so many advisors, especially even during COVID, who had like just started their travel agencies at the beginning of like 2020.
Oh, yeah.
But since then, and kind of following up with them, they said that that was the absolute best time to just start their travel agency because they were able to like really learn and see what was going on during that time. But it once travel really came back, and it definitely came back with a vengeance. They were ready; they had their systems in place, and they were able to like dive right in. So yeah, so I've talked to a lot of travel advisors that had that experience, and just a couple other things too in regards to the like supplier defaults or things like that that we kind of experienced a little bit in COVID. Talking to your host agency is so huge too. And usually, your host agency, they will know when there are certain suppliers that might not be doing well. And so it might be a good thing to really work with your host agency's preferred suppliers to, that there's a little bit more trust level there and a little less risk going
Yeah.
with those preferred suppliers that your host agency recommends. And then the last thing I wanted to mention too is part of the question too was, how do other travel advisors kind of prepare for things like that? A lot of travel advisors that have been in the industry a while, and also just business owners in general, we've all really like learned to prepare for interruptions, or to even have like emergency funds or like a rainy day fund to help cover those expenses, during those slower months. Because with any business that you own, you're going to have slow months and you're going to have big months, and
Yeah.
and so it's really important, like from the start when you first start your travel agency, to kind of plan for that and put aside that rainy day fund to really help prepare.
That's a fantastic tip, and definitely, yeah, when things are flush, uh, know that there's always going to be some kind of downturn coming in. I've always been a really conservative business owner, and being like, "Well, you never really know when the next COVID is going to hit, or the 2008, or whatever it is," and so great advice there. All right, next question is from April B, and April says, "I'm in the final steps of picking a host agency. My business is based in the United States, but my clients are from many different countries. I have a 16,000 person international reach, and I need to be able to service any client regardless of where they are citizens. I have been told that I can only book clients that are US citizens due to supplier limitations. Is this correct for most US host agencies? And then, if so, are there any host agencies that allow booking of non US citizens when my company is US based? This is a great question. We get this kind of fairly frequently. So, what's your experience been, Stephanie?
Yeah, I also thought that this was a really good question. I literally just a few weeks ago was having this conversation with another fellow travel advisor who is somewhat new. I think he's in his first year of having his agency. But yeah, so I think it's a really, really important question. Okay, so there are definitely a lot of different factors with this question as well. And so I'll probably touch on some, and I'm sure you'll have even more factors to kind of bring to this answer for this question. So when it comes to the host agency, so I know that that's part of the question too. There's definitely some host agencies that will allow international travelers to be booked, and then there might be some host agencies that might not. But it's definitely really important to, especially when researching host agencies, to ask them if they do have any limitations like that. So every host is a little different on there. So the host agency that I am with, and then a few others, they do allow, international travelers to be booked. And so over the years, I do a lot of wedding groups, and so this is most commonly where I've, been in the situation of needing to book an international traveler because we'll have weddings, and the wedding couple will have family that live in other countries, and so this has definitely come up over the years. But what I've learned is that some suppliers So let's say that you are with a host agency that does allow, they don't have any limitations for booking international travelers. There's some suppliers that might not allow you to book international travelers. So for example, I think that Princess Cruises is one where in their travel advisor booking terms and conditions, they do kind of have a policy. I think that you can only book US or Canadian citizens. And so that's one example. But the other biggest hiccup, so for other suppliers that do allow you to book international travelers, there's been a few hiccups that I've learned along the way that have made it a little bit more difficult. So the biggest hiccup that I have found is in regards to payments. So you may have some travelers that they don't mind if they're US citizens or whatever citizen, whatever country they might be from. But when it comes to the payments, sometimes certain suppliers will not be able to process a payment that's made with a foreign credit card or with a credit card that might have a foreign address on it. So this is like the biggest hiccup that I come across. So that's really important to kind of research those suppliers and to see if you can find those suppliers that do have like payment systems that accept foreign addresses and foreign credit cards. Then the second hiccup, so if you do find, so let's say you've got your host, they allow international travelers, and then you find a supplier that will allow a foreign credit card to be used for payment. The next hurdle that you really want to make sure that you're talking to those international travelers about would be in regards to foreign transaction fees. So here in the US, we are so used to so many different credit card options where, especially for travel reward credit cards and things like that, that they offer no foreign transaction fees. So, you know, if your credit card is charged for a transaction in euros or a different currency or something like that, there's no additional fees on top of that. I've noticed with a lot of my international travelers that is not very common. So
Oh,
most
interesting. I didn't
countries,
know that. Okay.
yeah, so a lot of countries, they don't have access to be able to apply for credit cards that don't charge foreign transaction fees. So that is important. So if you are putting through a travel purchase for someone and they're using a foreign credit card, the first thing that you should let them know about is to maybe call their credit card and see how much that foreign transaction fee will be. And especially with travel, it's usually thousands of dollars that you're charging, so that could really add up to a lot of different things. So those
Yeah.
are a few of the top issues that I've found. And then the only other things that are going to be a little bit different booking international travelers compared to US travelers is going to be in regards to travel insurance. Most supplier travel insurance and then third party travel insurance, you're not going to be able to book travel insurance for them. So it's really important to let them know that up front, and also for them to go ahead and really research travel insurance in their own country from an insurance company in their own country. And then also the visa process too. And I know that during the last question, you were kind of talking a little bit about this too, Stephanie. When it comes to visas, here in the States, there's a lot of places that we can travel to as US citizens that require visas, and then a lot of places that don't require visas. So it would be the same thing for people that are living in another country. So for example, like for US travelers to go to fly to Mexico, we don't need to like apply for any visas ahead of time or anything. But if you have some travelers who are citizens or that live, let's say in like South Africa, they do have to apply for a visa to go to Mexico. So it's just really important to make sure that your international travelers know any of the visa processes as well.
That's perfect. Those are great. I didn't realize the insurance thing. So I love these because I always learn something new on my Friday 15s.
Yeah.
Well, let me see. So April, I think I'm gonna share my screen really quick, but kind of the things to think about, just to recap what Stephanie said, is that There isn't like a quick yes or no answer on if you can book international clients with a US host agency because there's going to be a couple layers. So one is going to be the host agency, and that's where you're going to start. So what I would do is right now, like I'm on the list of host agencies. If we click on one of them, it'll take us to their main profile. And then right here, you'll see the question and answer tab. This is a great place just for you to ask if you have your top 10 or top 5 that you're looking for. You can put a really simple question in saying, "Hey, do you allow me to book international clients?" And then they can write, usually they'll get back within a couple days. That'll give you the answers right away that you need. And it'll also help other advisors that are looking for that information. And then our next level is then you need to go to the supplier and see, does the supplier allow international clients to be booked? And then will they allow them to pay with a foreign credit card or not? So checking out those 3 things, April. Sorry, we don't have an easy answer for you, but like most things in life, nothing's that easy. So, um, that is, I think, all we have for today. I'm going to link to Stephanie's agency if anyone wants to take a look at it. It is Just Perfect Travel. And if you're in, the Tucson area next winter, Stephanie and I are going to be hanging out. So let us know. It'll be super fun. Um, and then coming up for future Friday 15s, we have Fora Travel is going to be next Friday. The following one is Uniglobe Travel Center. We'll have April Swales on representing Uniglobe. And then Solstice Collective will be on May 23rd. If you're not familiar with them, they are in our new tech profiles. We will link to their profile. They do websites for travel advisors. So make sure to tune in for that. And then again, if you have questions, make sure to get those submitted. And also, you can also sign up for Friday 15 reminders at hostagencyreviews.com/Friday15. And then you will get an email and or a text message to remind you so you never miss another fun Friday with 2 Stephanies. How's that? Perfect. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun. I love your Friday 15s.
I know. Well, she's headed back to New Hampshire tomorrow. So safe travels home. And then we will see you all next Friday, 12 p.m. Central Time. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Stephanie.
Bye.